Hello and welcome to the Paddock Podcast. This is Stretford, Paddock, Jay, Ronaldo. How are we doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Yeah, good, man.
Football's back this week. We've
Yeah,
got
it
loads
is.
to talk about
Proper
today.
football.
Absolutely loads to talk about. How are you, Ronnie?
I'm doing great. It's getting a bit manic now as well in the transfer
exciting.
window.
Well, we're going to be talking about transfers.
Yeah.
I also want to look at this sort of right wing / sort of general wingers situation we find ourselves in. And I don't mean off the pitch.
Yeah,
I'm talking
I was going to say.
Nice. I was about to
Antony,
say, getting a bit
Sancho,
political there, Joseph.
Garnacho.
Start talking about the riots and that.
There's been enough right wing action in Britain over the last couple of weeks, but we're talking Manchester United.
Right.
Okay. What's good, what's bad, and basically, I think there's been a little tweak in how Ten Hag is looking at that position over the last few weeks, and we want to get into that. Get your thoughts in the comments as well. Let's start with that, because we've seen obviously Amad be pretty much ever present over pre-season. I know he's not played every minute of every game, but he's been one of United's mainstays. And I feel like, I don't know if it's just me, and this is why I want your thoughts on this, we're seeing a different way of build-up play slightly in the final third than we saw last season. I feel like the way we were breaking down Man City in that game, the through balls, the quick technical play on the edge of the 18-yard box from Amad, Casemiro, Bruno linking up, I don't think we saw that a lot last season.
No.
And to me, that could be a difference between Garnacho and Amad Diallo, the way they're able to play. Do you think, Ronnie, that we're seeing that because that suits Amad? Or do you think we're seeing that because Ten Hag has told him to do that and Amad happens to fit the way Ten Hag wants to play?
Just Amad's ball retention ability, really. It's funny because Antony was kind of brought in for a similar profile of player as that, as if you've got the likes of Garnacho and Rashford on the left, who are both very direct speed type of players, more not so much creative, but the type that's always a threat towards goal. And then the other side, you wanted to be a little bit more creative, players that hold onto the ball better, like a bit more technicality. That's what people thought Antony was going to be. Yeah. But Amad's come and showed that he's actually got that side of his game, but he also has a little bit of a burst of pace, the ability to beat a man, and actually can go both ways. But I think as much as it might have been Ten Hag's instruction, I think it's just Amad's willingness to show for the ball. Shows for the ball, and he actually contributes in the build-up, and he helps us get up the pitch. That football that you're talking about, how many times have we seen nice 1 and 2 touch play, giving and going, and it all came down the right side? And I think that's just because that suits Amad's game a little bit more. And obviously, as playing football, you know when there's players that you can trust on it. You know Amad's a player that you can trust on the ball. You know that if you give it him, he's got the ability to keep it and find you again. And that's why I'm excited to see how players like Amad play with Bruno and even Kobe Mainu.
Yeah.
Players with the type of technical ability in the squad that can combine with each other. And as you can see, against anyone, if you get it right, teams can't get near you.
Because we saw you mentioned Mainu, we saw in the Euros, didn't we?
Yeah.
When it was
Saka.
It was Saka, Mainu and Palmer, or Palmer, Mainu and Foden linking up in little triangles, and then occasionally Bellingham would wander over, and he's more of a sort of playing in space kind of player. He hasn't got those like quick technical deft touches, and sometimes it would break down. Do you think, Jay, that on the other side, you compare that, and we'll get into Garnacho as well because I want to talk about him in particular, but on the other side with Rashford, we don't necessarily have a player that is quite as technical, quite as one touch, quite as good at giving and going in tight spaces, and maybe that's why against City and some of the pre-season games, a lot of that technical stuff came down the right rather than the left.
Yeah, it did. It was weird in pre-season on the left. You saw a little bit more. I don't know, it was quite aggressive and running with the ball because Harry Amas was playing quite a lot of those games and he was on the front foot. He was always willing to link up with Marcus Rashford, and those two looked quite good together, but they were definitely like almost a little bit carefree with it all. And it wasn't sort of this 1-2 touch. There was a little bit of that, but it was like getting hold of the ball, running with it, being aggressive, trying to beat the man and all that. And it was good to watch because we've been missing a little bit of that down the left-hand side. But on the right-hand side, I think, was it the Betis game where we saw a lot of that as well, in particular?
Yeah, first half against Betis was excellent.
So I get your point, and Marcus Rashford is a different type of player, and if it isn't Marcus Rashford, then it's probably going to be Garnacho over there as well, which... I don't know, it's a weird situation at the minute, I feel like, with the wingers, because there's the case of what we'd want to see and what we're going to see, and I think there might be two different things. And I think the issue you've got is there's a case for all of them, and a strong case for pretty much all of them if you wanted to argue this is why Garnacho should start, or this is why Diallo should start, or even this is why Marcus should start. And it's just up to the manager and what sort of system he's going to play, who links up well with other players, like you were talking about there, who's going to link up with the likes of Bruno and Mainu, and where does Mason Mount fit into all this as well? There's so many questions. It's going to be interesting to see the Fulham game, just to see there, because he's got... Maybe not in the Fulham game. I think once Rasmus Hojlund's fit, maybe then you'll get your answer, because even in the Fulham game, there might be a temptation to put Marcus down the middle. But once Rasmus Hojlund's fit, if he's still got all the wingers fit as well, what is he going to do? What's his plan? Because I feel like Diallo's in pre-season and towards the back end of last season has staked a bit of a claim, has said, look, you know, you've got to start thinking about him, because you always mention him as being one of the better players technically, and he has been. And I think what I like about Diallo is he sort of... He does the things that you like about other wingers. He will track back, he will get stuck in, but he's also got that ability as well. And he's got that fearlessness and that confidence that sometimes he's missing. So there's a lot to like about Amad Diallo.
Do you know what Amad reminds me of? It reminds me of Jadon Sancho at Dortmund. Like, obviously not the same output, we haven't seen those numbers from him, but do you know, like, a very technical, tricky, first-time, feint kind of deft player, but then will be direct and going behind as well. You said there about the case for any of them. Garnacho, because we're assuming we're going to play two wingers, and we've got Rashford, Amad and Garnacho. I think Antony and Sancho were in a kind of different bracket. I think maybe Sancho's slightly more trusted than Antony, but you know, the history of those two, Ten Hag and Sancho, is checkers.
Can I just ask you that quickly before we move on?
Yeah.
Because I think it's worth at least asking that question. Are we all just done with Antony? Do we think he's done, or do we put any weight into that interview he gave? I think he did we know he did a sit-down interview with the media. I think there was a bit of a weird one, because I think he had a translator who spoke Spanish and he spoke Portuguese, and it was just that they had to work it out. And obviously the journalists were speaking English. Anyway, they worked it out. He said this thing about he knows he wasn't, he could have done better last season. He's going to improve himself this season. When you mention goals and assists, you're going to be talking about Antony. Are we all just dismissing that, or do we think there's still life in his United career? Ronnie?
Well, if United aren't going to be selling him, then as fans, we're just going to actually hope that he at least proves himself useful and playable in a way, because for a lot of last season he really wasn't, and I thought he contributed to dragging down a lot of the quality in our games and even just the output, and it seemed to be even a situation where something that United have been really good at, one of the few things United have been really good at in the last few years, is on transition, on the counter. I think we've always had a bit of that potency within the last few years, no matter which manager we played under. And I think too often we were playing like that in games, and the ball would obviously slow down and break down whenever Antony got on it in them situations. And then at the same time, you're thinking, all right, if you're doing that, you're not providing that transitional threat. When we give you the ball against lesser teams, create something. Either find a through ball, a whipped cross maybe, beat a man. And he did none of those things. How many times did we see Antony cut in, boom it over the bar, come in, strike straight into the keeper's hands, over-hitting his crosses inside that right-hand half space that he likes to get into. And I think United fans just became sick of it. It became so predictable, never even attempted to go down the right side. So there needs to be major developments in his game, because right now he's fallen behind a lot of the other wingers at the club.
He said as well in that interview, didn't he, that he is going to be working on his right foot, and that's one of his focuses, and he's got things written on a bit of paper or written on his wall or something of like targets to improve on. One of them is more goals and assists, which is obviously, I'm sure every attacker in the world would write that on their list, but working on his right foot. But you think, I mean, no offence to him, obviously you can always improve and you should want to improve, but surely that's not just entered his radar. Surely he's known since he was 16 or 12 that his right foot is a bit of a weakness. Do you know what I mean? If you're someone that's so one-footed, there must be maybe not dozens, but many coaches, teammates, whatever, family members who have said, let's get you down on that right hand side a bit more. Let's stay behind and do a bit of right foot training. Let's knock it, step over down the outside and whip it across. Let's get you even just having a functional. You can either go past a man and chip one to the back post, or you go past the man and drill it across the 6-yard line, or back to the penalty spot. Like, have two functional crosses you have with your right foot. Don't think about pinging it across the pitch. You're not doing cross-field 40-yard passes, but can you go past someone and pass the ball to the penalty spot? And if you can, that gives you enough variability where the defender doesn't know what you're going to do, so you can use that left foot as often as you want. Because I think what is he, 24, and you're just learning you need 2 feet. People like that to me, and I know you have to. Sorry, I know you have to have an incredibly high standard of right foot to be Premier League standard, because I'm left-footed and my left foot is probably worse than his right. So I get how good you have to be good, but I just think that, like, how much better is it going to get? Is he really just started working on it now, or are we really? This is probably what Antony is, I think.
Do you know what the issue was with that interview? And he says the right things, to be fair, but it's the amount of things he's got to sort out.
Yeah,
he's talking about your weaker foot, your number of assists, your number of goals, your attitude hasn't been great. You need to sort that out.
He mentioned that, didn't he?
Like, what? You're talking about, may as well just buy a new player.
He basically said, I need to fix everything.
Yeah, it was like that David Moyes comment of we need to improve on passing, tackling, shooting, and dribbling or whatever. Yeah. Like, it's like that. It's like, I've got to sort out this, and this. And you think, Jesus wept. And I say it all the time about Andy. I think he's been one of our worst ever, if not our worst ever signings. And I'd love him to make me eat my words. I just don't see it happening. Yeah. I don't. And it grates me a little bit, the way he carries himself, the way he acts. I don't like that about him.
People were also saying that the reason that Antony was getting a lot of, like, favourable pickings over Amad in terms of starting in the latter stages of last season. And people saying it's because he works hard off the ball. And you know what's funny? I think his work rate off the ball was slightly overrated as well, because there were so many games where fullbacks were running off him and he wasn't really tracking them either. And that's one of the things that I've actually seen from Amad this pre-season that surprised me. Amad works really hard off the ball, actually.
He does work hard.
His defensive side and track spot.
In terms of tracking back, I agree with you. I think one thing I will say about Antony, his numbers in terms of winning the ball back high up the pitch are very good. So maybe once they get in our half and that Newcastle, I don't even know if you played in that Newcastle game, but then where Rashford and that they were basically tracking into their own 6-yard boxes at St James's Park. He's not great at that stuff, but I think his ball recoveries, especially in the opposition half, are statistically very good. But that's not to say that he's phenomenal defensively, but I think in his defence he has got some decent numbers there. I want to talk about how we square the circle of Amad, Garnacho and Rashford fitting in 2 spots. But before that, Jay,
yes,
I want to have a word with you about today's sponsors, Manscaped. Okay?
Yeah.
Come on, Jay, talk me through
because it's an exciting time with Manscaped, right? They're always sort of raising the bar, aren't they? Smashing through the ceiling. You think they've reached the pinnacle and they go, no. We've got a higher level to reach. And now they've brought out what is being called the Beard and Balls Bundle. Beautiful. Yes, because not only do they look after you below the waist, they also look after your face as well, right? Because they've got the Lawnmower 5.0, which is just phenomenal.
You can see it on the screen right there. Look, I mean here it is. Look, wow.
Look at that. The
foil blade.
Absolute bad boy. But they've also got the Beard Hedger, right? And I love the Beard Hedger because it is titanium coated stainless steel T-blades, and that's what I want in life.
I mean, Jay,
that's what's been lacking in my life. There's been a lack of titanium coated stuff in my life, right? Yeah. And thankfully, Manscaped have addressed that.
I've always said that about you. And with
that's
the
what's held me back.
Devils20, that's Devils20 at checkout. You can get 20% off and free shipping with Manscaped. I mean, the Beard Hedger, it's got obviously the skin safe. It's all skin safe.
Do you know what I love about it as well?
About any of that stuff.
You know me, right? I'm a dirty boy, right? I need time in that shower. Yeah, I need at least an hour. Yeah.
I've seen it in real time.
Minimum.
And a team of hazmated up, jet washing bigger boys.
Yeah, exactly.
To get everything off you.
That's what I'm saying, man. Basically, I have to go through that car wash naked to get myself
your hair
sorted.
You haven't gone bald. Your hair has
just been scrubbed.
Absolutely scrubbed off.
Scrubbed off, right? But with the Beard Hedger, you can go in the shower for an hour. You've got 60 minutes. And it's waterproof, so you don't have to worry about that. 60 minutes of runtime. It's waterproof. It's got the LED charge indicator as well, so you're never going to be caught mid-trim with a dead battery. Yeah?
That's brilliant.
That is phenomenal. Yeah. Let's have it right, No, this is probably the best thing mankind has ever achieved. Yeah, I'm going to put it out there.
You get 20% off and free shipping using the code DEVILS20 at manscaped.com. The link is in the description. Go and give him a click. Manscaped.com and use the code DEVILS20. Your balls will thank you. Right, let's say we've got a left wing and a right wing.
Balance.
Let's assume Rasmus Hojlund's fit.
Mm-hmm.
Which 2 wingers are you starting and where are they playing? Because Garnacho looked phenomenal when he came on. Amad, I thought, was very good in the first half, was the main cause of us getting in behind. Not that City were playing deep, but even when we pressed them back into their own box, we were finding ways through them from Amad, and his ball playing. Ronaldo, what are you doing?
Say your truth.
The Garnacho one is such a mad dilemma, you know.
It is.
Because I've always, for me, Garnacho is electric, and he's even shown that from his youth days. And the fact that he's still quite raw in a lot of his play style, he's still got time to get physically stronger, and the way he plays, I think I've said this a few times. I've said it to Steve. I think I've said it to Jay off camera. That Garnacho's the type of player where I think he's just on the verge. I don't know whether it's this year or a year after. At some point, he's gonna have an explosion of goals. The way he plays, where he runs in behind, his directness, and it's almost like goldfish mentality, where a fullback could stop him 5-6 times and he'll still got him again. And he never really stops running, never stops trying, and he's got that knack where I think there's going to be a time where Garnacho puts it all together, and he'll very much be like a 25 goal a season winger for me. I think he's 100% got that potential, and I can see it coming sooner rather than later. But the issue is, he played 30 games last season on the bounce. Was it 30 plus games he started?
30 plus games in a row.
And
starts.
At that age, obviously you develop, but I'm concerned about, one, United burning him out, and two, I think Garnacho seems to be so good when he comes off the bench.
I know.
That's the dilemma, because he almost plays so well when he comes on as a super sub that you feel like there's no way he can't start the next game. Because that's almost the feeling now. I thought the way he played against City, there is no way you can justify him not starting for Fulham. But at the same time, any time that I see Garnacho as a sub, he seems to be at his best.
Yeah,
I think Garnacho against tired legs, or when he comes on, must be one of the most scariest things for a lot of teams to actually see. And I've thought that for a long time, and I think there has to be a time where Garnacho is able to be kept fresh, because last season I think he's playing 30 games. You'll start to see body breakdown. Maybe the form starts to dip a little bit because they're not as fresh as he should be.
I get you.
So this is what I mean. This is what I mean, because with Rashford, right?
Well,
like,
can we just stick with Garnacho for a second?
The only issue I've got with that, and I
Yeah.
understand where you're coming from, and I get it.
Yeah.
I think that's a hard sell for him.
What?
If he doesn't start, if you are having him as an impact sub, I think this is a player who's basically a first team player, and however you word it to him, you're basically dropping him. Do you know
That's what I mean. I think ideally,
you'll look at that and go, "You've got to be kidding me."
The perfect scenario should be Rashford should be the world class player that we think he is, and the ability that he should have that we haven't seen enough of in the last few years.
Yeah.
The way he's been spoken about, obviously the money he earns, Rashford, he should be the marquee superstar left winger that allows Garnacho not to start every game and be that 19-year-old that comes on and gets the crowd off their feet, and he almost and he's almost like destructive against tired legs, almost, as you can see against City. He should be able, and then he can start some games and maybe not others, and that's ideally where United should be. But the fact that Garnacho realistically should be the starting left winger right now for Manchester United at this point in his career, as good as he is and can be, it's definitely an indictment on Rashford, and it's an indictment on like where United are, because still, for me, if United want to be like a top 4 title challenging side, I don't think Garnacho's at the level where he should be definitely a left wing starting player. Do you know what I mean? But the way that United's set up now in the front three, I feel like you can't not have Garnacho there.
Let me give you a few sort of statistical
Get your stats
pros and cons of Garnacho.
Yeah.
And this is in the last year. Obviously, we have to remember he just turned 20, by the way, which I know you said 19. He was 19 all of last season. He turned 20 42 days ago. So
19 until he's 20.
Yeah, so he starts this season as a 20-year-old. So in terms of strengths, and it's weird because it is almost inverse to Amad, but we all know watching Garnacho how well he carries the ball. He's in the top 5% for progressive carries across all wingers in the top 5 leagues. His shots, his output, just in terms of number of shots, is in the top 7%. He averages 3.5 shots per game, which is, a lot for a winger, basically. He's excellent at taking the ball into the box, carrying the ball into the box. As well, carries into the penalty areas in the top 3% of all wingers in the top 5 leagues. He's genuinely one of the best in Europe at getting the ball outside the box and carrying it. Basically, the goal we saw against City, that type of run, he's one of the best at in Europe. The problem with his game at the moment, if you are Ten Hag and you want to hold the ball high up, maintain pressure and possession against a team who's sitting back a little bit, generally his passing, he makes, I think he's in the bottom 20% for passes attempted.
Yeah.
So he's not into that quick give and go, give me the ball, I'll hold it, go 1-2, 1-2. That isn't his game at all. In terms of his passing stats generally are not great. In terms of crosses as a winger, he's in the bottom 30% of crossing numbers in terms of pure number of crosses. So he's not the sort of winger that a Rasmus Hojlund maybe would love to play alongside.
No,
because
you can see that.
No, it doesn't.
Because he's not an assist maker and he doesn't put the ball in the box. So if you're Hojlund and you're a kind of a bigger kind of running behind number 9, Garnacho might not be your best friend as a teammate because he's trying to go with the ball himself and make shots for himself, which is a style and it is very effective, like we saw against City. But if we look at the whole picture, obviously in terms of fouls drawn and the way that teams foul him, he's very high in terms of that. So he's someone that is receiving a lot of attention from the opposition, which is going to leave spaces for his teammates. But can he add that extra element to his game? Because the problem that we have is, for me, he's similar to a sort of Rashford or kind of Ronaldo style player where he gets the ball and he thinks, how can this end with me having a shot?
Yeah.
Which is great, and that ends up, was it 10 goals last season and scoring some fantastic goals, always looking dangerous. But on the other hand, how can United win 40 games next season in all competitions? Do we need our striker scoring more goals and not losing confidence?
Yeah,
do we need someone who's going to put the ball in the box a little bit more? That's the dilemma with Garnacho, isn't it?
Those stats highlight what we all think. Like, Garnacho still is not the finished article, and he's got so much of his game that he does need to polish. But you can see the threat that he does have, and that's why, for me, I thought it would have been ideal at this stage of his career that Garnacho didn't have to start every game. But the way that he's performing in comparison to who's meant to be the marquee starter on left wing, it means that it's hard to leave him out.
What about the right hand side?
But that's the thing where balance comes in. I think if you got Rashford
on the right, can you not? Because the thing with Garnacho, I agree with everything you're both saying. I think sometimes when you move him over to the right, I mean, he's almost not forced, but he's encouraged to cross it more. Because when he's on the left, you saw it in the Arsenal game as a prime example, and that's been a bit harsh because that's probably his worst game he's ever had for us. But he was just constantly trying to shoot. Yeah. Constantly. He's on his right foot, he's trying to shoot, he's trying to sort of hit on the inside. Just non-stop. Like, not happening for him, but he didn't give up. He just kept going, and it was probably a bad thing that he did keep going because his shooting wasn't great. You saw it at Wembley. His first thing he does when he comes on is he crosses it for Rashford, who probably should have scored. To be honest with you. And I think when he's on the right hand side, sometimes he will whip it in because it's easier for him and because he's not as obsessed with trying to cut inside. And he's still able to do some of that because we saw it on Wembley. Yep. He cut inside and
he's good with both feet as well.
He worked it with a good left foot. I think it was a good left foot finish as well.
It was.
So my sort of big question here for both of you is Garnacho on the right hand side better than Diallo on the right hand side?
Well, I think that's where, if we move on to Amad and his sort of, it's harder to get data on him because he's played so few games, and that is one thing with him. What is he? He's 22 years old, I think, Amad. And you know, for me, just looking at it, he's 22. A winger who is 22 years old, who has been spoken about so highly since he was a teenager, having played so few top flight games, that's a little bit of a, I don't want to say red flag, but a little bit of a, okay, we need to know why. Because if you're that good, why has United waited 4 years before you've even got a chance in the first team? That, you know, something's going on there, isn't it? Obviously. But for me, I think Rashford and Garnacho as your two wingers. He's great in a counter-attacking style because they love carrying the ball, play the ball in behind. They're both fantastic at that. Like we've seen, genuinely incredible. We don't need to look at Rashford's stats. We've seen him at his best. He's one of the best counter-attacking wingers in the world. When teams are sat back defending deep, do those two as a pair, Rashford on the left, Garnacho on the right, struggle to break teams down a little bit? And for me, I think they do. We saw that last season. The output, the number of goals of the striker, the central striker, and just the number of goals generally.
Not enough creativity.
There's not quite enough creativity for me. So that's where Amad comes in, where, again, he hasn't got loads of assists because he's not played loads of games, but we can see from watching him, and we saw against City, the 1-2s in the box, where he's trying to square it to Mason Mount. If that comes off, he's got himself an assist. We saw his goals and his arriving in the box in pre-season as well. Is Garnacho on the left and Amad on the right, or Rashford on the left and Amad on the right, slightly more balanced and varied.
Do
you get the directness of your Garnacho or Rashford and the tiki-taka, ball-playing, retention, passing ability of Amad? Is that a combo that you like?
I will say one thing about Amad Diallo, and like, you know, you talked about there about why, you know, we haven't seen a lot of him in a United shirt. I think he's been a bit, not unlucky, but you wouldn't have expected to, because I think he came in around the same time as Jadon Sancho, who was played on the right. Plus, he played an hour of professional football, so he was always going to be a bit more long-term. Then the manager goes and buys Antony as well. So you've got Antony and Sancho and Marcus, who's hitting the form of his life on the left. So it was always going to be quite difficult. I know he had a couple of loan moves. One to Rangers didn't really do a lot. The one at Sunderland, he smashed it. Mm-hmm. And then he's come back and he's kind of forced the issue, because everyone was thinking he's going to go out on loan and he'll probably leave. Do you know what I mean? He had the touch of that sort of vibe about him, didn't he? And he stayed, and his opportunities were limited, but he took them, and he's taken them in pre-season as well. And I kind of feel sorry for Amad Diallo, because I think he's had a tough sort of spell, hasn't he? He's had a tough 4 or 5 years where he came over. There's some sort of intrigue about how he ended up going to Italy and what was going on. It
almost seemed like his brother, who was older than him, was kind of encouraged to go to Italy to play football, but really they wanted the younger Amad, who I think was 13 or so at the time. You both come together. We want your older brother, but really they were doing it to get to Amad. Even though it would have been illegal to bring him over at the age he was. It was all very strange. We looked
not a nice thing for the kids to go through either way.
Difficult.
You look at it. Then he's played an hour at Atlanta, I think, wasn't it, before we bought him for around 16, 17 million, rising up to 37 million, and all these add-ons. You know, was it AC Milan's debut when he scored?
Scored that header.
And then he gets his loan move. Again, he's having to move. Another loan move, he's having to move. He's coming into a team where you've got all these wingers that have cost loads of money, and Marcus Rashford, who's the highest paid player at the club. Very, very difficult. But somehow, he's managed to get himself in that conversation. And I think in terms of popularity amongst the fans, I think he's probably our most popular winger at the minute. Yeah. If you just went off what the people you chat to and the people who are on the comments. I think people rate him highly than they speak about Marcus, even Garnacho.
Yeah. So one of the things that we moaned about last season was that we thought too many players on the team weren't good enough at keeping it, or we thought too many players on the team treated the football like a bomb. And Amad was a breath of fresh air for us as a fan base, because he's come in and you're looking at someone that actually looks after the ball a little bit and has got a bit of technicality, a little bit of creativity, and it just seemed like a little bit of a difference from what we was used to seeing, because you're looking at Rashford and Garnacho on the wings, and they both play very similar in terms of their directness, and they're not very creative. They don't really cross that much and you saw how Hojlund had it difficult when it came to service, and a lot of the creative burden usually just falls on Bruno anyway, and he has to take that mantle on, and that's why I think it also depends on who's starting up front, because people think if you've got Xerxes, who's a little bit of a false nine type of forward, then you can maybe afford to have two direct wingers either side of him, but we don't know when we're going to see him. Ten Hag's come out and made it seem like even not so he's quite ready to be just thrown in there yet, and then you've got Hojlund who's injured. It's not the worst problem to have in terms of dynamic, because you look at the wingers, we spoke about Antony for a little bit, and then you've got Sancho who's still here. We're not sure whether he's going to be sold, and then it's like, on the surface, you look at Rashford, Amad, Garnacho, Sancho and Antony in terms of transfer value and market, and then you're thinking, United have a quite a deep winger room, but in terms of quality and performance, it doesn't feel that way. Do you know what I mean? Because you just got man just moving like they don't want to be here. I'm not gonna say who that was, but that's the vibe I got when I was watching certain man on a weekend, especially in the City game. But for me, it's looking like Garnacho and Amad are probably the two strongest two in terms of performance. But then you're looking at someone like Rashford, who's had his. How
do you drop him?
How do you drop him? Because of obviously what you've been promised. I've heard that Wilcox is a huge fan of him.
Jason Wilcox.
Jason Wilcox. He's a big fan of him, and one of the main reasons why Ineos and Wilcox went after Xerxes was to actually appease Rashford.
Okay.
In terms of getting him to play with someone that probably can get more out of him, and they didn't want to. I don't think they want to lose him because Rashford does look like a guy that is slightly getting his head turned a little bit in terms of he must be thinking at this point, the way I'm playing, my body language, a lot of the fan base are on my case, whether you might think it's right or wrongly. there might come a point where he's thinking 27, 28, should I actually move on? Or is it best for both parties to part ways? But obviously Ineos don't see it that way. So I don't think there's going to be a situation where Garnacho is actually able to consistently beat out Rashford. And that just comes from not even performance, just general stature within the club and politics. That's what I'm saying.
And also,
as an investment,
ability.
I really, do you know
because let's be honest, I know Garnacho is fantastic, but Rashford is the best we've ever seen Rashford and the best we've ever seen Garnacho. Rashford wins every day of the week, 30 goals in a season. You know, that is very difficult to replace, even with Garnacho. But we don't know where Garnacho will be. In 2 years' time, Rashford could be playing at another club, and Garnacho could be one of the best wingers in Europe. It's all up for grabs, and that's the problem. Do you see a world where it's Rashford sits on the bench? Can you imagine that happening?
100%.
You do?
I do. I don't think it will, and I don't want it to. I still rate Marcus Rashford, and it's mad to say this, but I almost feel like I have to defend that position, because whenever I say it, I get pelters, because it feels like Ronnie was saying that a lot of fans have turned against him, and I get it, because he's not had a great season. I think he's had, 2 of the last 3 seasons have been poor, and also his body language isn't great. But I still think Marcus Rashford is capable of great things. We've seen that. Even last season, which was a stinker, you look at, he scored against Liverpool, City, Arsenal, Spurs, and some of those goals, the goal at Etihad was one of the best goals I've seen in a derby. Like, he's got that in him. It's not like he's crap. He's not. There's some players who aren't good enough. Like, you can argue whether Antony's good enough. I don't think you can say Marcus Rashford isn't good enough. He's not a good player. It's just he's not consistent enough at all. And he looks like someone's got a gun to his head to force him to play for Manchester United in a minute, and that doesn't bode well. And I think with Ineos and everything they're doing, and looking at Marcus Rashford, they like him and all the rest of it, I get all that, but I think there will come a time where if it's not happening for him, and this is a bad season last season, and he gets to Christmas and he's had another bad 4 months, 5 months, whatever, where the manager has got to be going, look, I can't afford to carry this kid. Yeah. I don't owe him anything. I didn't buy him. I know he came through the academy. Like, he's not performing. He's not doing what I need him to do. I'm going to have to play someone who is. And the likes of Wilcox and Berardi or whoever, whether they like Rashford or not, the sensible men, they know football, and they're going to go, all right, okay, we've tried our best, this isn't working. Now, I hope it doesn't come to that. I don't think it will, but I think it could do.
And another issue is, like, I know we do get very sentimental as fans. We don't want to... I found it crazy the way I was seeing people being so upset about us even selling our Wan-Bissaka. So when you've got some,
I'm one of them.
Yeah, when you got some,
fair. Well, I'm the same with Amad.
Get really attached to, like,
Jay's not found his head since he got sold.
So you've got
disgusting. Worst decision this club's ever made.
So there's going to be a lot of people out if the situation did arise where Rashford was leaving, I'll be quite upset about it. Someone that's been a homegrown United player, has been there for however many years he has been. But the winger position's not like the defensive midfield area in the world market right now. It's not. I think wingers are more a dime a dozen, if I'm being honest.
You think there's a lot more good ones?
I feel like there's a lot more good wingers than there is when you're looking for example, a specialist midfielder or something.
I completely agree with that.
Do you know what I mean?
I do agree with that.
So that's why some people may argue that, like, the performances that Rashford's given you for the last 18 months, aside from that season he had where he was fucking brilliant for 7 or 8 months of it, someone will say you can easily probably go into the market and find someone that could actually perform at the level that Rashford's been playing at the last 18 months, or at least better. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And I think there's a lot more wingers, because I think it's become a very favourable position, like almost wingers inside forwards in the world of football right now, where I think if Rashford was to go and you got a decent amount of fee for him, and if it did come down to that, United should be, with a good scouting system, able to at least replace him. But it depends whether I trust them to do that.
I think now, with Ineos, you'd have more trust in him doing that, because my argument with Rashford has always been, careful what you wish for, because look at the right-hand side. We've spent 220 million quid on the likes of Sancho, on the likes of Antony, on the likes of Facundo Palestre. No disrespect to the kid, because I know he's still quite young, but none of them are probably first teamers. No. And we spent all this money on him. So you could, especially under the previous regime, you could quite easily sell Marcus Rashford for 70 million and go and spend it on a player who comes in, a Cody Gakpo or whatever, I'm not saying him, but someone who, you bank that money and you get, the left wing equivalent of Antony, whatever, who doesn't quite work out. However, I feel like you're saying, Ronnie, with Ineos, they'll have targets where they're confident, look, if we went out and got a left winger, it'd be someone who'd be effective, and you'd probably fancy him to do that. Whereas I wouldn't have fancied it under Richard Arnold or under John Murtough and Ed Woodward.
No.
So there's probably a bigger case to be made that there's some benefit to selling Rashford. I said this in Ten Hag's first summer, I said Marcus Rashford has got to have a good start to the season. Yeah. And I feel like we're there
and
again. He did. He hit the ground running. And then he got better and better. And by the time the World Cup came around, he was banging him in for England. He came back and he equalled Dennis Violet's record, I think, for the most goals in consecutive games at Old Trafford, and was just absolutely flying. I think he's got to have a similar start this time round. I don't think he can afford to have a start where his head's dropped, he's got no goals and no assists in 5 games, and people are going, the crowd are on his case. Because you hear it. That time at Wembley against Coventry, right, I'll be honest with you, I can't recall seeing a worse reaction to a player getting injured than from a United player getting injured.
In fairness to him, though.
It reminded me of Neil Webb, but he wasn't even injured back in 99. I'm showing me AJ when he trudged off the pitch. Marcus Rashford went down with an injury and he was getting absolute pelters off almost everyone. And this is match-going Reds. This isn't just people going, it's just there, it's online, because people try and differentiate. This was match-going Reds, and I was stood there and I felt bad for him because it was literally everyone was stood around me as well.
In fairness, I think his general performance against City wasn't even that bad. I think the 2 misses and the finishing is what people have highlighted.
But do you know what?
But I thought outside of that, usually we argue about his work rate and his body language. I thought his work rate and his body language against City was fine.
Yeah, I agree. And I actually don't mind him missing chances. Obviously, eventually I do. But Rashford is a sort of player who's never been a 35% conversion rate player. And you go, he's starting to miss. That's not like it. He's I'll score 1 in 8 shots.
Takes a lot of shots.
He's always taking a lot of shots. So the fact that he's missed a couple, all that means to me is he's more likely to score the next one.
Oh, it means he's getting into the areas.
Yeah, and the thing with Rashford that you need him to do is take a lot of shots. He had a 0.8 XG, which was more than City's whole XG for the whole game. Rashford by himself. So him getting in those areas to me is a good sign, because the problem with Rashford isn't him missing chances, it's him not having chances. Because he's someone who needs quite a lot. So if he's getting loads of chances, he's going to start putting them in eventually. That didn't even worry me, to be honest.
I also think as well, sometimes a lot of the time, like, criticism is valid. I get all that, and there's nothing wrong with criticising a player who's performing badly, and Marcus Rashford has performed badly. But there's times when I think, like, I thought he did all right in the FA Cup final. I thought his ball for the second goal to Garnacho was fantastic. I thought he did a decent job. And I even seen after that, I've seen like a few people criticise. I think, he didn't do anything wrong there. Yeah. Played his part in a win against Manchester City in an FA Cup final. I think there is an element of like, people are done with him.
Yeah, there's a bit of that, but it's also it's similar to what happened to Maguire, though, that people can argue against that, where players like Maguire and Rashford, who obviously it's not even their fault, are either on a lot of high wages, have a big expectation, name and reputation or whatever in the game. You've got Maguire who's come for 80 million, you've got Rashford who's presented and paid like a superstar player. There's obviously a heightened level of expectation for these players. So when they have these very, very long bad runs of form, and then fans obviously get upset with it, and then they end up having probably what people might call a narrative or agenda, where if they just make 1 or 2 mistakes, they're upset. You have it sometimes the other way then, where like, because they are so used to be playing poorly, or you're not seeing them play well very often, that if they just do an alright performance or they play okay, then people are saying, he's fine and everything's fine and rosy, when realistically still there has to be a level of expectation, because the performance, I've said the performance on Rashford against City, he missed 2 gilt-edged chances. His general performance was still okay, his body language was alright, but at the same time I don't think that should be like heavily applauded for a player.
It wasn't fantastic, but I don't think it was bad.
Yeah.
I think the stick was massively overestimated. I want to talk about transfers in just a minute. Before that, in the comments as well, let me know, because I want to get in some comments. Let's say we're 6 weeks into the season, Rasmus Hojlund's back, all things are as they are now. Other than that, who are your wingers? Who do you think give Man United the best chance of winning the most games this season? Left hand side, right hand side.
To start with, if it was up to me, it would still be Marcus and Garnacho.
Yep.
Garnacho on the right, Marcus on the left. But I do feel, especially Marcus, he's got to show us something early doors. I feel that, and I think if he doesn't, Garnacho's on that left hand side and Diallo's on that right.
Yeah.
And I think you could argue maybe the same, if Garnacho doesn't do enough on the right, he can get replaced by Diallo. But I do keep coming back to the feel like the pressure's more on Marcus than anyone else. Because as well, I think with Garnacho, you can forget he's only 20 years old. He's still, you know what I mean. Marcus is 26, I think.
Yeah.
Whatever. He's been at the club now. He's been a first team player for about 8 years. So come on.
What do you reckon?
Is this just for general, or is this for like the Fulham game?
This is just overall.
When Hojlund's back.
Yeah, assuming everyone's fit, who are your wingers?
For me, if Hojlund starts up front, the wingers can't be Garnacho and Rashford for me.
I agree.
I think got to be.
I think Amad, just because it's not always just about like the best player. It's got to be the balance of the team, the correct profile of the player, and I think someone like Amad's needed out wide if you're playing Hojlund up front. So I think I would have Amad starting 100%, and I think he's shown enough in not even just pre-season, but even in the 3-4 months before the season ended. And this is a player that's been here since he's 18. It's a big season for him now. Yeah. And I don't think he's been handled the best by Manchester United in general.
No.
In terms of his development. And I think the performances and the ability that we're seeing from him now, I think he's had to almost find that himself. And because I don't think he's fully been like backed and supported and developed in a way like we've seen many players come to United and not get that. And I think Amad's been mishandled slightly as well. I just think it's a kick in the teeth for him to play the way he has when he's been given the opportunity for him to just define himself on the bench again.
Yeah, I agree.
Just for the dynamics of the team just to look like they looked last season, where it didn't look that great with Hojlund up front with two wingers that don't provide for him.
Got a few comments. Yeah. Pretty much everyone's saying Amad. Yeah. Garnacho and Amad, Rashford and Amad. Adam says, Garnacho left wing, Amad right wing. I'll name this podcast later, Rashford and Amad. Pretty much everyone is saying someone and Amad.
Yeah, and you made a point, though, Ronnie, about Xerxes. The Ineos looked at him because someone who can bring the best out of Rashford, I think he said. Do you think there's any scenario where he could start over Hojlund?
That's what a lot of people might have started thinking, that Xerxes might actually suit the wide players that we've got a little bit more. But I don't know, it remains to be seen because we didn't even get to see him on the weekend. So if you want to be
playing behind closed doors, isn't it, this week?
Yeah, if you want to be cynical, maybe he's Ten Hag seen him in training and thinks, he needs a little bit more intensity, a little bit more work before he can actually start for United.
Edward Bamber with a super chat said, it's simple. If Xerxes plays, it's Rashford and Antony. If Hojlund plays, it's Garnacho and Amad. I don't think it's as simple as saying Antony starts when Xerxes does, but I do think someone made a good point. I think it was Joe who said, Joe Cochran said, there is no such thing as a first 11 anymore. And I don't fully agree with that, but I do think we'll see a little bit more. Are we playing against a team with a high line? If so, it's Garnacho and Rashford. Are we playing against a deep line, sitting back kind of side? If so, it's Amad and Xerxes. I think we might see a little bit more rotation depending on who we're playing against than we have seen in recent years. I want to move on and talk about transfers. De Ligt, Mazraoui both coming in. I've seen a bit of a narrative develop, and Steve's mentioned it, and I get it, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing with the point itself, but the conclusion I disagree with, which is United haven't improved their starting 11 since last season. Therefore, United have got worse since last season. And I want your thoughts on this. Personally, I think whilst the starting 11 may have technically got weaker because Varane's gone and we've replaced him with Yoro and now De Ligt and Yoro's injured, Casemiro's a year older, etc., etc. The starting 11 may not have got that much better. We need to remember that the starting 11 has not been the problem for Man United in the last 10 years. The technical ability of the starting 11 has not been the reason we've been so poor. Let me give you a starting 11 here. David De Gea, Wan-Bissaka, Rafael Varane, Harry Maguire, Luke Shaw, Paul Pogba, Nemanja Matic, Bruno Fernandes, Mason Greenwood, Cristiano Ronaldo, Marcus Rashford. That was a starting 11 we fielded in the 21-22 season. We finished 6th, the manager got sacked, and we were terrible. That is a phenomenally talented, well-balanced, very good starting 11. But it didn't matter. I think the problem with United isn't that we haven't had enough talented players. It's the whole confidence within the squad. It's the way the club has been ran. It's the pressure that everyone feels. It's the fact that we've got this weird combination of 37-year-olds and 18-year-olds trying to play together who haven't been able to build a bond over many seasons. I think United as a squad is much more functional with younger, fitter players in than it is with this weird variety of sort of misfits that have never really worked. I don't worry about the starting 11 because, sorry to go on, but you go back 2 years ago and look at Arsenal's starting 11, some of the names in that. At the start of the season, you're going, they're not doing anything. I think, 85 points or whatever they got? More than United have had in the last 10 years anyway, with Granit Xhaka in there, who'd been a laughing stock, with a young Bukayo Saka, with Martinelli, who never get any goals. All of a sudden, these things start to click, And the starting 11 is not irrelevant, but you need players playing together and a squad that is playing together. That for me is far more important than a starting 11 who has been full of talent for the last 10 years and we've done nothing.
I think I've said it loads on it though, when it comes to signings. See, a lot of United fans have got this shiny toy syndrome anyway, where they've complained about how the Glazers and Richard Arnold and John Murtagh have been in terms of the way United have done business in the last 10 years, which is chase after big names, overpay for these names as well, and don't actually improve the team. That when United are being a little bit cleverer now and actually going for signings that probably raise the floor a little bit rather than raise the ceiling, people are feeling underwhelmed, thinking, who's the star signing that we've got? Who's actually going to raise the level of the starting 11? And I think United are in a situation where, as I've always said, sometimes raising the floor of the team is just as important as raising the ceiling of it. And I think that's what the signing of De Ligt and Mazzarri has done for me. I think United need to do that, because sometimes you've got all these big names. The starting 11 might look strong on paper, but realistically it's quite dysfunctional. It doesn't mesh together. And then once a couple of players get injured, there's this huge fall off and there's this massive drop. I think there needs to be less of that at United, and also there needs to be more of a togetherness in terms of the players that I've chosen and that I picked, and there's got to be an understanding, there's got to be some sort of like synergy between the players and the manager as well. Obviously there's a lot of moving parts to do with it, but for me, going back to what I said, I think the statement is signings like that raise actually the floor of the team, just as important as those star names that you see that you feel like are just going to come in for like half the transfer budget, that one player, and then elevate the team, when it doesn't work like that.
No. The big thing about the starting 11 for me is whether Lisandro Martinez is in it. Like, he's such a big player. We're a different team when he plays. And you looked at the starting 11 last season. Are you counting the FA Cup starting 11, or are you looking at the starting 11, which was 90% of it, where he didn't play? Yeah. So if you've got him fit and he's playing, then that is a much, much better Manchester United team than whether it's anyone else playing there, whether that is a De Ligt or a Yoro or a Maguire or a Lindelof or whoever. I don't care. Lisandro Martinez, for me, is probably one of, if not the most important player for that system, the way Terry Ten Hag wants to play. And he's just an outstanding defender. He really is. He's phenomenal. And if he's fit, then I think you've got a puncher's chance of beating anyone. Without him, I think you struggle. And we saw that last season. Yeah,
I agree. We didn't see our first choice starting 11 at all last season. So the whole starting 11 thing, let's see it before we...
How often did we see Varane, Martinez and Luke Shaw play last season?
5 times together?
Altogether, because that's your starting 11.
Very quickly, Ronaldo, who's your Wally of the week?
He's my Wally of the week.
You must have one, come on. Can't keep doing this.
Nah, do you know what? I think I've actually got quite a couple of options in my head, actually. But one of them could have been Steven Alson.
Well, go on.
Well, let's go with that, because I like the sound of that. That's funny.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to bait out the reason for him. I actually got a Zetto camera because that actually works against the problem. I think I'll actually highlight it. I'll tell you after.
Right, okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Unbelievable stuff, that.
But
absolutely sold us down the garden path.
I think for Wally of the week, Joe and Jay should go first, and then I'll say mine.
Go on, Joe. Who are you going for?
I think everyone having a meltdown after losing the Charity Shield, when really it's a friendly game, and actually United put in a better performance in that game than we did in about 95% of games last season. I was buoyed by that performance, not demoralised by it. I'd much rather lose a game and play like that than win a smash and grab where we've conceded 25 shots. Onana's had the game of his life and we've had 3. I thought United were the better team against Man City. We created more, we held the ball pretty much as they did over the course of the 90 minutes, and I thought we were very good. So losing on penalties, I don't really care.
Nah, I'm with you. I'm going to go with Vincent Kompany. I saw that video of him losing his marbles at someone in training and going on with himself. And I just thought it's performative drivel, honestly. I just feel it is. And also, that documentary is a documentary about you getting relegated. Yeah. So obviously your tactics and your managerial approach didn't work very well, did they? And I don't really mind Vincent Kompany. When I interviewed him a couple of times when I was reporting, I always got on with him, considering he was a City player, I never really minded him, but I just thought he came across as a right Wally.
Could either go with Graham Souness for his comments on De Ligt today,
brilliant,
or I could have went for Todd Bowley and his and how he
go on.
It could be a about 5 or 6 things he's done this week.
Was it 35 signings in 2 years?
You see how the Meridian, is that how you say his name? It broke down last night, and then they're going for like Felix instead, and Gallagher's in a hotel for 4 days. He might actually have to come back because the signing might break through.
He's got COVID.
He was the one they wouldn't let train as well. Like, it seemed like the Arsenal players, it's like, you're not training anymore.
To be a Chelsea
Shalaba, like, you can't train with the first team anymore. We're getting rid of you. Like, the proper, like, draconian.
They're buying youngsters, like, from all over the world, like 18, 19-year-olds that are unproven for like 20, 25 million, and then just completely segregating and selling for pure profit all their like Cobham prospects like Shalaba and Gallagher and stuff like that.
Horrible.
It's a gross way of like
just footballers are just coins of profit. Right, that's going to be all from us. Make sure you check out Manscaped. Use the code DEVILS20 for 20% off and free shipping. The link is in the description. Please go and check them out. Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you, Jay. Thank you for watching at home. This has been the Paddock Podcast. We'll see you in a bit.